Good morning and good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's workshop, Identifying Cybersecurity Threats in Real Time. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. All attendees are in listen-only mode. However, at any point during the presentation, you could submit a question by typing it into the control panel. We will collect these questions and address them during Q&A at the end of the presentation or via email if we run out of time. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenters today. We have Jordan Cambett, Technical Account Manager at SOC Prime, and Richard Patrick, Solution Architect at Humio. Richard is going to take us through the agenda slide today. Richard, take it away.
Thanks. Yeah, so the agenda for today is first we're going to start talking about SOC Prime and their approach to security and their threat detection marketplace. From there, we're going to then talk about Humio as a platform and how it is that we integrate with SOC Prime, which will then be followed by a quick demo into Sigma rules inside of Humio, and then we'll follow that up with some Q&A.
All right, so first off, I want to make sure, can everyone see the right screen? Yeah, there we go. Looks like we have that. Okay, great. Well, yeah, let's get started. Laura and Richard, thank you very much for having us on the webinar today. We're really excited to be here, actually, really excited to share our message with a lot of your audience. And hopefully we can talk about some interesting things. So yeah, again, my name is Jordan. I'm SOC Prime's Technical Account Manager. And today we're going to talk a little bit about our threat detection marketplace, but of course our whole approach and what we're trying to do and achieve as a company, and in some ways why Humio is kind of an important part of that. So we'll start off with just doing a very brief intro on the company background. I don't want to bore anyone or spend too much time talking about where we've come from, but it is important to understand at least that we've been around for about 5 years. We have customers all over the world in every kind of industry and of every kind of size. Our team, ourselves, I actually used to come from an MSSP background. I started off as a SOC engineer, eventually became a SIM engineer, SOC analyst and then SIM engineer, content developer, and in some ways kind of like a technical account manager as well. But most of the folks on the team do have some experience working with SOC and SIM, and collectively we all kind of found, even independently on our own, what some of the major challenges and issues were with security analytics, and we all came together to work on what we think is our critical mission here at SOC Prime, which really is advancing security analytics as a whole through the combination of technology and industry expertise, right? So technology in some ways is really just a code word for products, and industry expertise is, again, probably just a code word for services. But we really do believe that it needs to be a two-part approach, right? You can't solve security analytics, you can't move security analytics forward for the entire community, for the entire industry, without having both of those two things. So again, we are actually a bunch of analysts, engineers, and developers. Only recently have we actually started to add some more sales-oriented and more marketing-oriented folks, but we do definitely feel like we are driving some needed change in security analytics. And so while we're kind of still on this slide, I want to spend just a second talking about what we mean when we say security analytics, because again, we're actually trying to change the conversation here and not just, not just add on to it. The thing that has been lacking, and the reason why personally I feel that security analytics has not really succeeded as well as it could in the past, is because we haven't had the proper level of dialogue. And so that's why we're here today, right? So security analytics, right? If you are thinking about the traditional like CISO mind map, and you're envisioning all of the different areas of security like prevention, detection, remediation, GRC, risk management, all of those different kind of domains. There are many more, right? I'm just not awake enough at 7 in the morning to talk about all of them. There are many, many different domains, right? And traditionally, when we have thought of security analytics, we've kind of jumped immediately to that detection component, right? A lot of folks think that security analytics is just about generating alerts. Now, the important thing to remember is that they're not exactly wrong, right? Generating alerts is an important part of what security analytics is, but it's much more than just generating some alert that gets fed to a tier 1 SOC analyst that is processed and then gets escalated to a tier 2 and tier 3 and so on, right? Security analytics has the potential to be much more interesting and much more involved and much more relevant than that, right? So the way that we think of security analytics is as a data-driven process for building and advancing your security as a whole. So there are so many things that you can do with data to actually improve on your security posture, your security capability, right? There's so many things that you can do with data to reflect how well your risk management process is going, right? There are so many things you can do with data to reflect how well you're meeting certain regulations or compliance needs. And security analytics doesn't just have to be about SOC analyst processing alerts. And so really that's the kind of message that we try to instill and that we try to share with people, because once you adopt that message, once you take that message to heart, then you actually start to adopt what I call more of like a data science or at least data analytics mindset. And that mindset is what really determines your success when it comes to things like SOC and SIM and generating all those other interesting data insights that we talked about before that are relevant to security. So now that we're kind of approaching or thinking about things maybe from this data-driven perspective, right? We actually need to start thinking more like data analysts or data scientists. And the way that I suggest that we do that is through what's called the AWESOME framework or the OSIM framework. It's something that is known in the data science world that I won't necessarily claim to be an expert on. The thing about security analytics today is that we've kind of taken these IT admins, these network admins, these firewall admins, right, and given them this highly advanced kind of piece of technology or pieces of technology and told them to do things with that technology and with that data that they aren't classically trained for. Now, obviously, being classically trained for something is not the be all end all, right? There are some really, really good security analytics folks that I know that come from very, very strong IT administration backgrounds. But I also know some really great folks in security analytics that come from even wilder backgrounds, right? I used to work with a phlebotomist. Before entering security analytics, she was doing phlebotomy. She was taking people's blood, and she had a fantastic way of thinking about data and asking questions and understanding how to ask the right questions. And that's really what we need to start doing better, is thinking about data properly, asking the right questions and asking them more quickly, right? And so this whole step 1, step 2, and step 3, obtaining and scrubbing, exploring, modeling, interpreting, acting on information. This is how we can actually give ourselves the best shot of asking those questions and getting them answered quickly, right? So this first phase, obtaining and scrubbing, this is where a lot of folks kind of mess up. This is where things start to go wrong and very early in the process. And the most important thing to understand about this process, or this first part, is that number one, you need to know what data you're collecting, right? It's not enough to just collect everything. You need to know really, honestly, what data you can possibly collect in your environment, and more importantly, why you're collecting certain pieces of data, right? Having data that is not necessarily meaningful to your long-term objective is not going to help you in the long run. It's going to, regardless of the platform you're using, it's probably going to slow it down a little bit. It's going to be more data to sift through. It's just not very efficient. But from a security perspective, right, and from the perspective of building security value, we want to know why we need certain pieces of data. And if you can actually bring that insight early into the process rather than later, you can save a lot of time and a lot of effort. Now that's the first part, right? It's just figuring out what to collect and why to collect it. The second part of that first step, though, is also figuring out how to collect it, right? From just an engineering and technical perspective. How do we actually send that data? How do we, build that pipeline? How do we ingest that into our, log management, analytics, or SIM solution? So that's its own, kind of heavy lifting. And I think that's probably where a lot of the IT admins and network admins, again, not criticizing you all, I love you very much, but that's probably where a lot of the IT admins and network admins sneak into this whole process, right? Is building that pipeline, maintaining that pipeline is just so, it can be such a huge task. So I don't envy you at all. I'm glad that you do that work because that's not my favorite part. So yeah, that's step 2 of 3, or phase 2 of 3 of step 1, right? The last phase, probably most important. Well, that's probably not true. They're all important, but it's highly important that you scrub your data, right? And scrubbing, in our context, probably means something like parsing and normalizing your data, right? So the idea here is that you really want to have your data in a standardized schema, one way or another, right? Doesn't have to be, built into the platform necessarily, but you do want to have it normalized one way or another so that you can actually go into your data and analyze it more quickly. And it's hard to describe really why that makes analyzing data better and easier, but you're just going to have to take my word for it unless you've, actually seen it firsthand, which I suspect that if you're on this webinar, you probably have seen log data firsthand, and you probably already have some kind of generic sense of why it's important to have data that looks the same. But once you get past step 1, and only when you get past step 1, can you move on to step 2, right? Now, step 2 is exploring, modeling, interpreting. This is actually where we start to kind of maybe not be as true to the original framework as we could, right? So often when data scientists talk about modeling, they're actually talking about real analytics, like real math, things like, machine learning models or AI models, deep learning, right? All of these fancy terms that we still as a security community can't wrap our heads around and can't agree on what they even mean. Well, that's what data scientists mean when they're talking about modeling. And so personally, I don't think we're really there yet as a community, as an industry. There are some, good products out there. I'm not going to name names, not going to point fingers. I think there are some interesting products out there. There are some things that are going to happen in the next, few years that will be very interesting around smarter systems that look at data. But when it comes to most log management solutions and most practices and most knowledge and expertise that we have today, we're not quite there. So what is it? What does it mean? It means this step means kind of 2 things. So number 1, exploring your data. You can't ask questions about data unless you know possibly what that data is and what kinds of answers your data might be able to give you, right? I mean, you could ask questions all day long and never get an answer, but again, that's not very effective. We want to be effective. We want to, be able to do things quickly because we're talking about security, right? We have real, actual, valuable, meaningful assets or, money on the line here, or our business continuity on the line. We don't have time to ask questions that don't have answers because we don't have data, right? So number 1 is exploring. And when I talk about exploring, I mean kind of sometimes just looking at the data, just going in, running a very basic search and just looking at the data, seeing what it looks like, seeing did you do a good job of scrubbing your data? Do you have fields that make sense and are in the right place, or at least in a place that makes sense for a human, right? Are you missing any data, right? Check all of your work from step 1, and that's actually how you can explore your data very well. Modeling and interpreting is where things start to get a little bit murky, right? There is, when it comes to security operations, or SOC. There tend to be a few different approaches. I've seen teams that don't generate any alerts really, and just look at dashboards and just have reports that they will review every day or every week. And that's an approach. I'm not going to say mean things about that, right? We all know that your capability or the amount of quote unquote work you do as a SOC analyst or as a SIM engineer or even as a threat hunter is highly dependent on your capacity as a team, right? If you just don't have enough people, you're just not going to end up tackling a lot of alerts. And so again, anyway, I'm getting off track. That's one approach, right? The second approach is like highly focused on alerts. All you're doing is processing alerts, right? I remember a time when I was doing something like 30 cases a day, and there's an important distinction to make between incidents, alerts, and cases, right? Alerts are, for the most part, things that a SIM can generate that it's an interesting security event, right? There's usually some kind of logic that which generated that alert, but not all alerts are incidents, right? Not all alerts are something that needs to be fully investigated. Not all alerts are something that need to be handed off to incident response to have action taken on them, right? That distinction between alert and incident only comes through strong processes, only comes through really good detection content, and a lot of teams struggle to make that distinction, right? And so now everything is an incident, quote unquote, right? And everything is a case. And that's another approach, right? Again, there are lots of reasons why you might have that kind of approach. But the final approach, right? Obviously, this is a spectrum, right? There are folks that are in between, but the final approach is one in which you don't necessarily have a simple set of dashboards that you're always looking at. You don't even really have necessarily many alerts, but you are highly focused on threat hunting, right? Which threat hunting, we could spend all day debating what threat hunting is and what it means and what it is and is not. You're just going to have to take my word for it when I say that most of the time it's probably just a mindset, and it's a mindset of thinking about threats and thinking about attackers and performing like free-form investigation and development based on that perspective. Like that's one of the most simple descriptions of threat hunting that I can make. So there are folks that just do threat hunting and don't really do like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Well, maybe tier 3 can be considered to be part of threat hunting, but they skip over all the other stuff. And that's also, I think that also has its challenges, right? So we want to find a really good balance of all three of those things, right? We don't want to be overloaded with alerts, but at the same time, we don't want to miss the most recent and relevant threats, and we don't want to have we don't want to not have enough time to do this kind of free-form threat hunting, because that's what a lot of us enjoy. It's how we improve our skills. It's how we learn more about the threat landscape. It's how we learn more about malware and software and techniques and all that. So there needs to be a balance. And so what we do, and finally we're talking about a product, our threat detection marketplace is essentially this giant repository of SIM content, or we call it like security detection content. It's applicable in many SIMs. Humio is one of those, which we're very glad to be working with. And the idea is that often we're faced with both a time, which I call it a capacity issue, and a expertise issue, which I refer to as a capability issue. So we have a capacity and capability issue specifically within security analytics. The capacity is, the time required that you need to invest into actually researching a threat, into actually trying to understand how that threat operates, how you might detect that in any environment, let alone your environment, and then actually develop or tune that well enough and implement it into a SIM platform, right? That's all of that is an expertise or a capacity and capability problem, right? So just finding good content, building good content, and then figuring out what to do with it is all a challenge. And with our threat detection marketplace, we try and solve that challenge, right? So I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, but basically the key point to take away from this, which I mentioned earlier, is that security capability as a whole, not just security analytics, not just security operations, is a three-part problem. Technology goes a long way to helping solve the security capability problem, but ultimately, you still need people that are going to have to use that technology, and how they use that technology is probably going to be defined by processes. So it's a three-part problem. You can't solve security just with technology alone. It is a people and processes problem, and that's why we focus so much on talking about mindset and approach, and why SOC Prime has a few professional services specifically designed at giving you a sense of where you are and then telling you how to approach problems, right? Specifically from a log collection perspective, specifically from a detection coverage perspective, we try and map all of that against MITRE ATT&CK, tell you where are you at today, how can you improve meaningfully in the next 3 months, kind of quick wins, right? And if you improved, what would that look like visually and in terms of metrics? So yeah, let's keep going here. Yeah, so this is another component that, again, I don't want to spend too much time on, but one of the challenges with security analytics, and of course, security operations, is that we have a really hard time describing what we're doing and why it has value to to the larger security organization, and to some degree, just the larger organization as a whole, right? The metrics that we've been using and that we've come up with in the past, I don't think we're highly effective, or they just didn't hit home. They didn't resonate with a lot of people, right? Number of rules or alerts or incidents, the rules you develop or alerts that you've generated in the last week, month, or quarter, incidents, those are all relative numbers, right? They don't mean anything because they're influenced by so many things, right? If I tune an alert, or if I tune a rule, the number of alerts is going to go down. If I make a new rule that's not tuned, the number of alerts is going to go up. Incidents, actually, that might be an interesting metric. But again, most folks have a problem with making that distinction between alerts and incidents. Number of threat hunting exercises, mean time to detection, mean time to respond. Again, it's not that those are like bad metrics. They're just not super meaningful. They're very relative, right? So really had a hard time communicating operational metrics. Number two is organizational alignment. So the reason why metrics often, or why the work that we do in security analytics doesn't often really hit home is because it's hard for us to describe how what we're doing relates to organizational strategy, business strategy, right? And the only way that I think today we can meaningfully do that is by being threat specific, which what I mean by that is thinking critically about what threats, what groups, what tools we think are going to be targeting our environment or our organization, and then adjusting our detection coverage to meet or counter those specific threats. And you can do that through MITRE ATT&CK today, and we'll spend like 2 minutes because I want to make sure that we keep going. We'll spend like 2 minutes talking about that. And then return on investment, right? This is, everybody knows, everybody's familiar with this challenge, right? You really do need to get more value from your data, from your SIM, and it's oftentimes maximize the value of your existing technology. So just literally 1 minute on this slide. One of the things that the threat detection marketplace does is, again, I mentioned how these metrics are not the best, but it's what we have, it's what we're working with, right? So in the threat detection marketplace, we actually have over 2,000 rules that you can use in your SIM platform. We, on average, release more than 100 new rules a month. And so that's a really easy way to boost that metric, just download, well, even if you just download 5 rules a month, that's probably, I'm gonna guess, a pretty big improvement for most teams, right? Most teams. There are exceptions. Threat hunting, right? Threat hunting, again, is not the most time most costly part of threat hunting from a time perspective is not the clicking around in the sim, it's coming up with the ideas and doing the research and preparing. And so every rule that we build has the research built into it. So like reference articles that were used to build that particular detection. It has a hypothesis that's built into every rule. And so I wouldn't say that all the research is done for you, but the bulk of it, and that's a lot of time saving. That's a lot of easy kind of education, easy expertise that you can have access to. Meantime detection, meantime response. So we actually try and produce detection content as quickly as possible, especially as it relates to emerging threats. We also provide a timeline so you can see when the CV was published, when a detection was published. Good metrics to share with leadership, right? If you can show that you were able to implement a detection in your platform, a day or 2 days before or after the CV was actually published, that's just a nice metric to share. Organizational alignment, I think this is really the most important one, but again, I only want to spend a minute on it. The most important thing about security analytics and how we change and how we move forward is how we communicate, right? And part of that is going to be through these metrics, like showing how many tools, how many actors, how many techniques we can cover. But again, more importantly, showing how we can actually meaningfully demonstrate a capability to detect a given threat actor, or meaningfully demonstrate how we can detect a particular technique that we know a threat actor uses or a tool. Now, the challenge with this, right, is that some teams don't know what threat actors are targeting them. Some teams don't know what tools they need to be looking out for. Some teams don't know what techniques they need to be looking out for. That's okay, right? The beauty of the attack framework, even though they say you shouldn't use it like this, is that you can use it as a checklist. It's a very basic start, but it'll give you some interesting metrics to work with. And the last component here is just return on investment. So, we know that the SOC and SIM and security analytics log management environment looks fairly diverse, and that everyone has different security appliances and products in their environment. We want to be, agnostic of all those. I mean, there are certain ones that we like, hint, hint, but we want to be compatible with all of them. So yeah, just know that we can help you get there with whatever platform you're running. Lower development costs. So this is actually a one component that I will spend maybe one more minute on. So one thing that I haven't mentioned about the threat detection marketplace, I told you that it's this giant repository of SIM content. It's actually more than that to us, though. We created the TDM to really be a space for the community. We created it to be act as like a platform and have an ecosystem where individual developers that don't work for us, people in the community, people that, we've known and worked with in other open source projects, how all of that works. We wanted there to be a space for them to share what they know, teach others, collaborate, and ideally get a little something back for it. So we actually have over 70 threat bounty hunters that are part of our program. Again, they don't work for us, but they are a part of our program. They will actually develop content, publish it to our platform, and then they'll be incentivized. They'll get a little bit of compensation based on what they develop, how many downloads they're getting, what the reviews of what they're developing are. There's also a component of if they're developing things that our community is asking for. So we do have like a wanted page, like a threat bounty page. That's why we call them threat bounty hunters. And the threat bounty, basically we have our entire community, our entire user base submit what they want to find and what they want to detect. And then our threat bounty hunters will go out and develop it. So that's a really important component to us. We are all about the community. We know that, especially our platform and as it relates to Sigma, which I haven't really mentioned that at all during this portion, but as it relates to Sigma, they're like we owe a lot to the community. Me personally, I've learned so much just from the community as a whole. We want to give back, and this is our way of doing that. So yeah, that is it for now. I mean, we'll mention one last thing. If you haven't already, please sign up for an account at tdm.socprime.com or send me an email and just shoot me some questions, because there's a lot for you to kind of learn and explore, and a lot of value to get out of the platform just by looking, right? So this isn't something that's closed off to everyone. Again, it's a community platform, so please join us, contribute. We want to hear from you. We want to know more about you and what you're working on, and how you're doing things. So that is it from my side. With that, I will hand it over to Richard, and he will talk some more about Humio.
All right, cool. Thank you. All right, hopefully everyone is seeing the correct screen right now. So I am here, I'm going to talk quickly about Humio as a platform, and then from there I'm going to dive into a quick demo of how it is that we integrate with SOC Prime and how I can take advantage of those inside of Humio. When we talk about Humio really being a platform that allows us to log everything and answer anything and do it all in real time, the way we kind of answer that is that Humio is a very modern, streamlined platform that works in a manner that's very different from traditional index-based logging solutions. So in our case, we are designed to be a index-free streaming platform, so that as data is flying through the system live, we're able to analyze that information, alert on that information, and do it much more quickly than a traditional tool that is writing indexes first is going to be able to do that. We're available both self-hosted locally as well as on the cloud, so we can be deployed in either place. And we're really not only just for security use cases, but also used by a lot of people from a DevOps standpoint as well, because a lot of the things that we're looking for in security translate right over to things we're looking for operationally. As far as who is running us, we have a lot of momentum with large organizations. Organizations that are producing hundreds of terabytes of data take advantage of us because of our ability to handle very large amounts of data and be able to do that with a small footprint. So because of that, it really allows us the ability to provide unlimited ingest. And so what it means for me as the end user is that I can literally log absolutely everything. One of the conversations that I've had with many companies over the years is, well, I can't afford to log all of my data, so I'm going to pick and choose. Humio is designed to allow me to literally take anything that's generating logs and then put that into Humio, where I can then simply ask questions of that to start looking for whatever data it is I want. And we'll look at that a little bit when we actually dive into the demo. So the things that I want you to think about as kind of the key pieces of Humio before we take a look at it is, one is we really are a real-time observability platform, because we have live dashboards, we have live alerts, and our search times are sub-second latency. And because we can really understand any data source, whether it's structured or unstructured, and have the ability to search through that. Because of the speed and the flexibility of our searching, it gives us the ability to not only detect things quickly, but it makes it very easy for me to start finding things for events that really aren't occurring where I expect them to occur. I can literally ask questions of the system to go and find data. And then that last piece, again, is about the scalability and the flexibility, our ability to ingest hundreds of terabytes of data, the flexibility of where it is we're going to be deployed. And then also, we are using 68% less hardware than other solutions, which means that our TCO from a hardware perspective as well as a licensing perspective is much lower than other solutions that are out there. So as far as how it is that I make SOC Prime work with Humio, I'm going to first dive into the threat detection marketplace that we've been talking about to kind of show you how that works and how it is that I can go find data that's in Humio. When I'm inside of here, one of the first things that I can do really quickly is I have this nice filter over here on the side that lets me pick what it is that I want to look for. In this case, I've picked Humio from the available platforms that I can grab. I can also grab the different Sigma rules. One of the things that I have access to inside of Humio is a repository that's a sandbox repository. So that gives me a really good place to kind of work with these experimental and testing rules. So if I want to kind of get ahead of the game, I can use that sandbox environment as a way to do that, or I can grab those stable rules, which I can then just drop straight into my production data, knowing that those have been vetted out and that they're going to work. Also, from a content availability standpoint, I can use the community stuff, which is all the data that is freely available, as well as the exclusive content that is available with that with the SOC Prime subscription service. I can also do a lot of other filtering on top of that. They have a ton of different things. I can look for, say, threat hunting or compliance rules. I can get pretty granular as far as what it is that I'm looking for. Once I have my filters in place, all it takes for me to really drop that into Humio is I just go and grab that particular rule and go ahead and dive into the query that's behind it. So when I'm looking at the Sigma rule, this is what the rule as it was created by Sigma. And then I've got Humio over here, that's where this translation has taken place. This is one of the really cool things about how this integration works. We're literally taking the rules that have been written by the SOC Prime folks, and it's just translated over into Humio queries. So in order to drop this into Humio, I'm just going to grab this and copy it to my clipboard. When I'm in my list of alerts and I grab a new alert to create, all I really have to do is just drop that particular query in place, then go ahead and give it a name over here on the side. I tend to take them and name them the same as they show up in SOC Prime, so that way it makes it very easy for me to cross-reference that. I can then assign some type of a notification to that, the frequency with which it's going to go ahead and trigger, and then from there I can run it and I can go ahead and create that alert. So it's really a pretty quick process. One of the things that we have coming out in the very near future with Humio is also a function referred to as packages. What packages will allow me to do is, rather than importing rules one by one, which is what we're showing right now, going and finding that rule inside of SOC Prime and just manually importing it, what packages will allow us to do is to pre-build a collection of those rules that I can then just directly import into a Humio deployment. So that packages feature is going to be very cool, because it means that we can then provide to you as customers is pre-built combinations of rules that I can go ahead and drop in place. Now, the way alerting works inside of Humio, I tend to think is a bit different than the way other platforms work, in that is that live nature. One of the challenges that I've definitely heard from people is that if I'm going to have all these different alerts in place, well, I want to have to sort of pick and choose, because I don't want to bog the system down. So I'm going to take some of them and say, well, this is the stuff that's going to be live. All these other things are going to run on schedule, because if I've asked the platform that I'm using to run all of these alerts in real time all the time, it's really going to hurt things. Because Humio is a streaming platform that's literally designed to run thousands of concurrent queries, I don't have to play that kind of resource allocation game. I literally just create my alerts. They all run in the background. And then because of the nature of Humio, as soon as anything comes through that matches one of these alerts, that's going to go ahead and generate that event. Now, as far as how those alerts get delivered to me as the end user, there's several different ways we can go about doing that. The way I've got it set up, I've got email alerts that are going out. I also have a dedicated Slack channel. We have built-in integrations with PagerDuty, Opsgenie, VictorOps. Also, we can use webhooks. In addition, there are a lot of SOAR platforms out there that we have direct integrations with as well. So I have a lot of different ways to go about sending alerts to different systems. When I get an alert inside of Humio, in this case, it's showing up inside my Slack channel, where things are kind of the same as what we're used to, is when I click on that particular link, it's going to take me in and it's going to show me the events that occurred and the time window in which they happened. And this is the way that most traditional platforms work. I get the alert, it's going to say, well, this is what happened, this is when it happens, and then from there I'm going to start pivoting off of that data to go find things. Because Humio is a live platform, one of the things that I can do directly from this alert is sort of flip the switch to say, well, I don't just want to know that the alert happened. I want to be able to see if things are occurring in real time. This is where Humio becomes valuable both from a security and an operations standpoint. So what I can see is that since that particular alert fired, I've actually had other attacks against this particular host trying to use different usernames. So not just administrator like I initially saw in my alert, but I've got somebody who's always also trying to hit it using the admin or user accounts. And I can see that that's something that's literally actively happening right now. It's actually happened 4 more times within the last 2 minutes. And because we're streaming, we have the ability to do that. Within here too, if I wanted to just take a quick look at that spike, I can go ahead and grab that as well. And this is the stuff that triggered our alert in the first place. So I have that ability just within the alert to start looking around at those time frames. It gives me ability to both look forward, and also if I wanted to look retroactively a little bit, I could do that as well. So if I wanted to go kind of backwards before the alert triggered, I can also do that. So I have that ability to move around really quickly. Now, as far as digging into the data, this is where I think Humio gets really cool. I can go ahead and isolate that particular host if I want to, and then because of the way that the query language is designed, I can go ahead and then look at all the individual events that have come through, so I can see those actual log messages. But what I can also do from within here, first off, the way I've got this set up is to kind of truncate things so that I can have more data on the screen, but I can also very quickly change this so that if I want others to look at the full log message as I go through, I can go ahead and do that. I also have the ability to add fields as well. So if I want to have additional fields that are going through here, I can go ahead and do that. And then as far as going in even further, I can keep looking at this host. I can keep identifying things that are going on this host, and hopefully you can see the speed that I can do that. If I wanted to go ahead and dig even, say, 30 days into the past on this particular host, I can go and grab that, and I can get that data back very, very quickly. In this case, in the last 30 days, I've got almost, I've got 2.7 million hits against this particular host, and I can do the same thing that I was doing before, where I can go ahead and grab that particular event. And then from here, if I want to go ahead and then do a quick group by of all the different accounts that have tried to hit this particular host, I can do that, and I can get that information really very quickly. Also, because of the way that it's designed to work, if I go ahead and look at a different data set really quickly, is because we're live, when I put my dashboards together, all of these different dashboard widgets that I have put in place, these are all live as well. So again, my dashboards are all providing me with live data as opposed to having certain widgets that refresh themselves at different rates. As a last piece, what I like to show from a searching data, when I talk about using Humio as a way to ask questions, our free text searching capability is really also very quick. I can just literally look for a string of data, and Humio will go and grab that. So I have that ability to also kind of mix and match the way that I'm looking for data. So I can go ahead and do a free text search for one piece of information, then maybe I want to go ahead and do some sort of a wildcard search for more data from there, and then from there I want to go ahead and do a more specified search as well. So Humio is a very powerful platform in that regard, as far as the different ways that I can find data, the speed with which I can get that. And then what that SOC Prime integration does for us is it really does give us that ability to work as a traditional SIM works. And that I can take these different rules that SOC Prime has put out there, I can very quickly and easily drop those into Humio, and I can start getting a lot of actionable intelligence really right away. And because of the nature of our platform, I get that intelligence much more quickly and much more streamlined than other tools. So at that point, we did leave the last 15 minutes or so for questions. So this is the time to do that. And I've got a couple that I wanted to answer right away, and then I want to see, this is the part where I haven't used this a ton of times. Let's see.
Yeah, I'll just chime in really quick and say that,
yeah,
and to kind of reiterate what you said, being able to ask questions of your data very quickly is exactly kind of the objective that we're looking for. And just to everyone in the audience, again, that's one of the many reasons why we were partnered with Humio, because the platform itself is so conducive to, the whole methodology and mindset that we spent 30 minutes talking about earlier.
And so some of the questions that have popped up regarding Humio. The first thing we've definitely, hopefully, shown is how it is that the speed at which I convert those into Humio queries. That essentially that piece of work has basically been done for us. You don't have to, as the end user, even do those conversions. You're just dropping that data in. Now, one of the things that popped up is, well, how is it that data gets into Humio in the first place? We're very flexible as far as how data comes in. We are compatible with just about any data shipper that's out there. We understand the Elastic protocol. So if you're somebody that already has a bunch of, say in the case of Windows logs, I've got a bunch of WinLogBeat agents or a bunch of FileBeat agents out there, or maybe if I'm sending things to Logstash and I want to forward it, we understand that protocol. It's just a matter of pointing those at Humio, and the data is just gonna go ahead and show up. Also, we've got a lot of folks out there who are using things like FluentD and FluentBit. We also understand the Splunk HEC protocol. So if you've got those Splunk lightweight forwarders, we can understand that data as well. Also, for on-prem installations, we do act as a syslog listener. So if you wanted to just point syslog devices straight at Humio, we can listen to those rather than having to have kind of an intermediary that sits in between. And then as the last piece, there's also an agent called Vector out there, which we support directly, that serves the same function as all those other agents as a way to go and grab those logs and ship them in. As far as security around data coming in, we use the idea of having these ingest tokens to get data into the platform. What the ingest tokens do is they really kind of serve two functions. What it does is it lets Humio know that it's okay to accept this data, but then it also lets the system know where it is that it's going to send it. Because in Humio, one of the things that I can do is I can organize my data out into different repositories, and so that's how it is that I tell Humio to which repository of data I'm going to go ahead and send it to. And then one of the other questions that had popped up, and I think we showed it, is, how is it that we go and find that needle in the haystack? And that's part of the way that we do it, is that way to essentially ask questions. So a big difference for me, I've been in the log management space for quite a few years, is that we are parsing data out. Even though there's no index, hopefully one of the things that you can see over here is that we really are still parsing data out, so I can look at it in that way that I was doing it, where I can just go ahead and grab pieces of data and look inside of different fields. But in many instances, someone will come to me and say, well, I just need to know if this particular event has happened on the network. Well, I don't always just know right off of the top of my head, well, where inside this giant index should that data reside? And so I'm kind of trying to memorize all these different fields. What Humio allows me to do is just do the question piece of put that string of data in and say, just give me back anything that contains this string of data. And then from there, I'll go ahead and then dig into the different fields that are associated with it as a way to dig into that data. So the way I think of it is, because of the speed and the power of free text searching within Humio as a platform, it means I'm no longer reliant on having to make sure that all of the data that I've got coming in is being parsed correctly and being parsed into the correct fields, and then always having to make sure that I have an understanding of what data should appear into all those fields in order for me to go and find things. Now, were there any other questions that popped up for me or regarding SOC Prime? Okay. All right. Any other questions that have popped up out there? I'm looking on the question list. Okay. Somebody popped in and said, how do you how is it that you write a rule inside of Humio? It's really pretty straightforward. If I go back into this particular alert that we were looking at before, essentially any query that I write inside of Humio can be turned into an alert. We're using the same query language absolutely everywhere. So once I've learned it once, it applies to everything. So what I can do is I can take the query that I've put together, and one of my save as options over here is to save it as an alert. All I have to do is tell it that I want this to be a live query, so that live query actively tails this particular event. And then all I have to do is tell it that I'm going to save it as an alert. I then go ahead and assign a name to that, give it some type of a notifier and a notification, and then go ahead and enable it. That's one of the real powers of the platform. One of the things that's also kind of cool, if we work our way backwards, looking through this particular alert and how it's put together, one of the things that I can do in Humio because of a free text searching, and this is something that a lot of other platforms have a challenge with, is you'll see that when we look at the way that the queries work, we're using basically concept of Unix pipes, basically is acting as a bunch of then statements. One piece of that alert is just a free text search for the word failure showing up. Other platforms that will do free text searching can do that, but it's very challenging to make it part of an alert that I've written because the free text searching tends to be a very taxing function, whereas in Humio, it's honestly one of the faster ways to look for data. And so that's what I can do as part of that alert. So hopefully that answers that question about how it is that rules get written inside of Humio. Anything else for me or for Jordan? So what are the event enrichment options? So ways that you can go about enriching things. One of the things that Humio just does on the fly as far as enrichment goes is we do have our own geolocation database that we tie into. So one of the things that we do right away is being able to translate IP addresses into locations on a map. So that's something that we're just simply providing, because I know if I look into my Windows logs that I'm just going to see an IP address. It's not going to tell me where it lives. That geolocation database gives me the ability to do that. Another thing that I can do as well is that I can also do enrichment from the standpoint of if I want to integrate with different threat feeds, and this kind of goes back to a lot of what we can do with the SOC Prime folks. Let's say that I want to pull in like the list of Tor servers like abuse.ch. I can pull those in as CSV files, and then I can write rules that are designed to go ahead and match that. So hopefully that helps answer that question. I think one other thing that I can do also from an enrichment standpoint, using the different files piece, is that it means also if I want to group servers and say let's say I have PCI compliance and I want to go ahead and create a quick list of PCI servers, I can put those as a CSV file, and then I can write rules where the first piece of it is I'm going to reference this list first to make sure that that server I'm looking for is one of my PCI boxes before I continue on further. And then let's see what else have we got. The CMDB integration, we've got integrations folks that work on all of that. They could probably answer that a little better and faster than I could. So that's one of those questions that I will make sure to get along to those folks. And then as far as when the packages are coming, packages are supposed to be coming out in the next release, which should be in the next month or so. So that feature will be out very soon. That will coincide with the Humio marketplace that's coming out as well. What that marketplace gives us the ability to do is when I start talking about packages, packages are more than just collections of alerts. They can also contain dashboards. So not only can I give you a collection of alerts that you can plug in, but I can give you dashboards that I can plug into the platform. Also, I can then put in custom parsers as well. So if there's some type of parser for, say, a certain log source, that I need to plug in, I can make that part of a package. So it makes it that much faster for me to spin up specific log sources and build content around those. From a standpoint of UEBA, Humio is not a behavioral analytics platform. We're not really focused on machine learning. In our case, we're designed to tie into those kinds of tools. So if I've got something that is a dedicated UEBA platform, we can use Humio as a way to provide data to that. We can either use Humio to essentially forward data into those tools for analysis, or work in the other direction where that tool reaches out to Humio to go grab that kind of information so that we can do analytics against that. All right, anything else? I'm trying to see if there's any other questions that have popped up on the list.
It looks like that might be Richard. Should we close it out?
Looks like that would be it.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Jordan, for presenting today. Thank you, everybody, for attending today's workshop. Just as a note, we'll be donating $10 for every attendee of this event to generosity.org. They've funded more than 800 water projects serving more than 500,000 people in 20 different countries. If you have any follow-up questions, please send them to us at events@humio.com. We'll be sending out a recording of this presentation in the next day or two in a follow-up email. And there's a very short survey that comes up at the end of the workshop as you exit. We'd appreciate your feedback on the content presented today. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.